Charlottesville is putting the issue of racism in America front and center. Now, some will say, well, that's a mistake. We shouldn't be giving any attention to this group. But they're actually on the rise, and they're actually right-wing extremists responsible for the majority of domestic terrorism. So they matter. Let's discuss what's going into their growth and what may lead to a strong battle against them. We have Timothy Zoll, a former skinhead, and Daryl Davis. He's been confronting KKK members for 3 decades, asking them to give up their robes and walk away. We appreciate both of you to talk to us, Tim, especially you and you, Daryl, coming from different experiences on this, but coming to the same place of wanting to fight against it. Tim, let me ask you something. It is being set up as a false premise, what the president suggested, which is that the hate groups that were down there and those that were opposing them share blame for the violence. In your estimation, what makes hate groups like the KKK, like neo-Nazis and the white supremacists that came together down there, different from those who oppose them?
What makes them different from those who oppose them? I don't see much of a difference in the violence, but the main difference that I see is that there's people who are standing up for the rights of others, whereas with the white racialist groups, they're against everybody. They're victims. They're gonna use that sort of language to defend themselves and blame everyone else and come up with conspiracy theories. This is nothing new. This has been happening for decades.
And Daryl, what's your take on that? The president looking at a situation like Charlottesville and saying, well, you know, the violence was brought by both of them, so there's an equivalence there.
Well, there's not an equivalence in belief. Like, as Tim was saying, you know, one side wants to bring everybody together, and the other side simply wants to stand for their own. And the violence on both sides is wrong. Any kind of violence is wrong. And as far as the president goes, you know, we spend a lot of time blaming people. And really, you know, we have festered this culture long before Trump got in office. I'm not defending what he said by any means, but what I'm saying is, you know, we got to start blaming ourselves for allowing this culture to exist. We should have been talking about this kind of thing for a long time and bringing some kind of understanding about the racial divide long ago. I've been doing it for 30 years successfully. And so, of course, it's ripe for somebody who comes in and fans the flames. But we have to blame ourselves and stop blaming, you know, anybody else.
Well, it's a tough problem. It's got lots of fingers into different facets of society. And even just having the discussion doesn't mean you're necessarily going to have progress. And the point of that, Tim, is that even though this isn't a new issue, it's on the rise. Whether you look at domestic terrorism or the openness, the brazen nature of the demonstrations that we're seeing from the right-wing extremists, what do you think is feeding the growth?
What I think is feeding the growth is there's a lot of people that feel victimized, and it sounds strange to have white racialists believe that they're victimized and that there's some sort of the decimation of the white race. And this is nothing new. And I think the best way to combat hate, and I agree with Daryl on a lot of issues, is that the way to combat this is to love them. It sounds difficult for people to do. You know, everybody wants to politicize everything, and I think it's a highly politicized situation right now. And the best way to move forward for this particular country and this particular situation is that we need to understand that these are human beings as well, and hurt people hurt people.
What changed your mind and your heart and got you to leave that belief?
For me, you know, I got burned out. I was completely obsessed with the destruction of the white race. In my mind, I lived in a war zone between my ears mostly, and was in a very delusional sort of state of mind. It was exhausting. In my late 20s, early 30s, which is very common for formers to disengage from radicalization, fatherhood, parenthood is often a major attribute as well. It usually takes people 3 to 5 years to disengage. These days, though, you know, back when I was trying to get out of the white racialist movement, I didn't have any resources. I had to navigate it on my own. At least today, there's people such as myself and other organizations around the country who unfortunately have lost their funding due to the current administration, who are there to help navigate others out of a radicalized sort of mindset and lifestyle.
It seems, Daryl, that there's been a boost given to the far right in the form of this new label of alt-right that has given some kind of protective cover for what many just see as, another brand for racism. How has that complicated the job that you have of trying to get people to move away from that ideal system?
It hasn't complicated it at all. But let me just add into something that Tim was saying. What's happening is this. The reason why we're seeing this rise is because, when I was a kid, the population of black people in this country was 12%. Native Americans were 1.9%. Hispanics and Asians were like 2 to 3%, and whites were 84 to 86%. Today, black people still remain at 12%. Hispanics have surpassed us at 13%, according to the U.S. Bureau of Census. So if we just take blacks and Hispanics, 12 and 13, that makes 25% non-white. And the white supremacists, nationalists, separatists, alt-right, etc., they are predicting, and rather accurately, that by 2042, it will be like this. It will be 50% white and 50% non-white. And shortly thereafter, whites will become the minority in this country. And that is very troubling to them. With all the neo-Nazis and Ku Klux Klan people that I deal with, what they keep telling me is, I don't want my grandkids to be brown. They call it the browning of America. So when you sat on the seat of power, of supremacy, for so long, you don't want to get up off that throne. And that's why we're seeing this rise. Now, as far as alt-right goes, the original term from way back was white supremacy. These people were white supremacists, and they were proud to call themselves white supremacists. But a lot of violence came behind the name white supremacists. Lynchings, church bombings, burnings, dragging people behind cars, etc. And there were white people who did not want to associate with blacks and Jews and things like that, but they did not want to participate in the violence. So they began to distance themselves. But so the name changed to white separatism, but the violence came with that. Then it changed to white nationalism. Violence came with that. So now it's alt-right. But a rose by any other name still a rose.
Semantics.
It is important to understand what's going on in the heads and the hearts of these people. And it is good to have, Tim, you could be right, but that's a hard prescription for change when you have to love what it is that you're against so much. I guess that's a problem with those
Love drives
who
out
believe
hate
it.
every time.
It's true, but it's
Absolutely.
easy to say. It's hard to do. Gentlemen, thank you for helping forward this conversation. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Pop.
Thank you.
That was eye-opening. All right, America.